Propaganda comes in many forms. One such form is white propaganda, where the origin of the propaganda is clearly stated. Gray propaganda does not state what the origin is, and black propaganda explicitly says that it originates from somewhere that it is not, usually for the purposes of spreading false information or discontent among an enemy. Black propaganda was first heavily used by the British Political Warfare Executive, or PWE, during World War II. At the time, it was kept top secret because the British government considered it almost shameful tactic to be lying to civilians even if they were the enemy. Recently, however, the final details of the propaganda campaign have come to light, revealing the true nature of World War II's psychological warfare. The PWE's black propaganda campaign began with simple flyer and leaflet drops and eventually developed into far more successful radio stations. The PWE's black propaganda campaign began with flyers and leaflet drops. At the beginning of World War II, propaganda was primarily white. Planes would fly over Nazi Germany and drop leaflets, which served the double purpose of attempting to turn popular German opinion against Hitler and also giving British planes a chance to scout bombing targets. However, the British government in 1941 decided to create the Political Warfare Executive, which was then ordered to develop black propaganda. Millions of leaflets, newspapers, stickers, stamps, and posters were developed and dropped over Nazi Germany, produced in several different languages according to the National Library of Scotland. Many of these leaflets were created by the wife of Sefton Delmer, who himself would eventually become an influential black propaganda radio host. She created magazine-type leaflets that were designed to capture the attention of the average soldier. Most of the time, this involved some type of sexual content in the first few pages, and then once the Germans' attention was captured, Delmer's wife used the following pages of the leaflets for news, in which she subtly implied that things were not going so well for the Germans during the war, at the fault of Hitler and the other German higher-ups. Many pamphlets such as these were dropped over the course of the year, and although Delmer's wife eventually divorced him, she did continue to work for the PWE until the end of the war. Given that there are no records of how many people read the leaflets, there is no way to know exactly how many people were influenced by them. It is difficult to estimate how successful the leaflet campaigns were, but regardless of their effectiveness, they are significant in that they began the PWE's black propaganda and inspired the far more successful and influential black propaganda radio campaign. The PWE's black radio campaign was spearheaded by none other than Sefton Delmer. His most influential black radio station was Gustav Siegfried Eins, in which a disgruntled German, who Delmer named Der Chef, or the Chief, complained about corruption in the higher ranks of the German army. Der Chef was extremely convincing because he was voiced by German refugees who had a flawless accent, and he claimed to full-heartedly support the war and German pride. He just didn't support many of the officers in the government. Delmer and his associate Peter Seckelman wrote the nightly scripts, using information from German prisoner of war interrogations and Allied espionage to add true details, which made the story that much more believable. The German government went crazy trying to find Gustav Siegfried Eins, according to the UCLA library. Hitler sent out many search parties and raids, but they were unable to find the broadcasting station because Delmer was broadcasting from England and not some rural German hideout like everyone thought. Near the end of the war, Delmer ended the station by staging a break-in by the Nazis on live air. However, he accidentally played this twice, revealing Gustav's facade, but the damage had already been done. Another popular propaganda station, also led by Delmer, was Soldatensender Calais. Soldatensender was supposedly a German military station, which Delmer used to give the German false information about the war. The radio station was one of the pivotal factors in the Allied execution of D-Day, as it was used to spread false information amidst the German public and military about information that was supposedly learned by German spies. It was so successful that the U.S. was using the station to plan military operations until the British sent them a note warning them not to take it seriously. In an interview with Howard Becker, Alfred Weber, who was a middle-aged German citizen at the time, says that he remembers listening to Soldatensender Calais during the war and that he's sure it really came from England. But at this point, Weber's wife jumps in, arguing that it came from the German naval units on the Atlantic coast. Even years after the end of the war, most German citizens remain unsure of whether Soldatensender was a real station or not. Unlike with Gustav Siegfried Eins, Delmer continued Soldatensender until the end of the war, at which point he simply stopped broadcasting. This maintained the integrity of the station and prevented a slip-up like on the Gustav station. Again, it's difficult to gauge how much effect the black propaganda campaign had. The majority of the population listened to at least Soldatensender Calais, and both stations were successful in deceiving the German people concerning the origin of the station. And given the intensity of Hitler's response, it's fair to say that the black propaganda campaigns were at the very least a thorn in the Nazis' side. Black propaganda is an aspect of World War II that is rarely talked about. The British government doesn't like to admit that they took part in such, quote, immoral tactics, and as a matter of fact, the Queen has disavowed the use of black propaganda. And up until a few years ago, most of the information regarding the PWE was sealed. However, with the release of the government's record on the PWE comes a deeper understanding of the factors contributing to the Allied victory during World War II. Aside from being a critical part of the Allied D-Day plan, the black propaganda radio stations and leaflets ensured that the German population had a source of news other than the Nazis' version of it, which put doubt in their minds. Historians will never know how many people decided not to enlist or not to join the armies after being exposed to the PWE's campaign, but what they do know is that it was a historical campaign in which, for the first time, black propaganda was used to a great extent.